Hey, it's Joe here. Almost a year ago now, the much anticipated 5th version of Sony's PlayStation was launched. It's quite a few months after, and it's still frustrating trying to get hold of them due to circumstances including global chip shortages. That said, over 10 million have been sold by the end of July 2021, solidifying in its place as the fastest selling console in history. In this video, I'll be giving an overview of the console, having been using it for the past 9 months, and sharing my thoughts taking into account some of the latest updates and what we saw highlighted at the recent 2021 PlayStation Showcase. Starting with the design, which if you hadn't seen any promo of the console and opened a blank box with it inside, your first reaction could have been shock, or you may have appreciated the curves and departure from the norm. It's definitely a statement piece, unapologetically bold and screaming to be seen, not least because the dimensions are so big, it doesn't actually fit inside many media cabinets. I checked the PS5 dimensions whilst they were available and got a TV stand with a space big enough to fit the console, as I was in the market for one, but not everyone will be in that situation, so I can see why it might be a bit Marmite, with some really loving it and others not so much. I think I would personally have liked a slightly more angular design, which fits nicely with a modern contemporary aesthetic, but it does look like a slice of the future, and I really like that about it. Who knows, maybe a redesign in the future will bring it a touch closer to what I have in mind. I prefer the digital only version as I like the symmetry, and my PS4 Pro had that. The Blu-ray drive version, as you can see, is not as symmetrical, but I'd rather have the drive as I have quite a large Blu-ray collection, and it gives me the choice of getting second-hand games and taking advantage of retailer sales, which can be better than the PS Store ones. The Dualsense Controller. You can see it matches the console's colour scheme and curves, going full monochrome with the buttons, and the only splashes of colour coming from the inbuilt LEDs around the touchpad. I found the slightly larger form factor and trigger buttons to be a bit more comfortable than the DualShock 4. Having been using a third-party controller, the Razer Raiju Ultimate, for over a year, I've gotten used to a more weighty and premium feel, with the extra programmable buttons, ergonomic shape and grippiness of the Razer Raiju being a major step up. So I was conflicted about how much of an upgrade the DualSense was, but there were 3 key things that tipped it over the edge for me. Firstly, the adaptive triggers. The triggers being able to change how they feel and react depending on the in-game context is amazing. Although playing Astro's Playroom is probably the first experience most PS5 users had to try this out, for me, the game changer was the Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, where I actually felt the resistance when pulling the trigger, the lack of when the mag is empty, and even the difference between gun types. One of the most memorable is when using the combat bow, drawing back an arrow and really feeling the tension in the string. Haptic feedback is the second big change for me. Whilst not always as obvious as the adaptive triggers, it allows me to feel the terrain, the gun recoil, and sadly, the shots hitting my bullet-riddled body as I get ambushed by some random third party. This feature is utilised to great effect in Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, and also the Spider-Man games, where the feedback is subtle and deliberate, depending on what is happening in game, such as the rumble of a nearby vehicle, or the feeling of gliding through the air when web slinging. It is the immersive cherry on top. The last change that tipped the balance for me was none other than the mute button. Even though the addition of the mic into the controller is a new feature, apart from blowing into it for a segment in Astro's Playroom, I've never used it in any other games as I'm mainly using a headset. The mute button on the other hand is used very regularly and saves me having to reach for my headset all the time. Not the biggest change, but definitely a welcome one. Looking at the interface, it is different but familiar, and coming from a PS4, you'll feel right at home in the settings menu. The separation of games and media apps is a better way to organise, I think. I don't use the console much for watching anything other than maybe the odd YouTube video, but pretty much all the main streaming apps are available. The quick menu from the PS4, which you had to long hold the PS button for, has changed to the control center, which is a single press away and can be customized to show what you want where you want it. I've finally been able to move the turn off button to the start position rather than scrolling all the way to the end every time, which felt a bit long. I'll speak a bit more about the latest firmware update in the next section. The game switcher can be used to quickly close and start up a different game, but it isn't true quick resume like the Xbox Series X and S, which lets you pick up at the exact point you left off, rather than the last save point or checkpoint. That would be a welcome change. The latest firmware update went live this week, on the 15th of September 2021. This incorporates many of the changes previewed in the firmware beta testing program that had been running over summer 2021. It has introduced some very welcome changes, including clearly labelling PS4 and PS5 versions of a game. Changes also include the use of 3D audio through internal TV speakers, and updates to enhance the game-based function, which houses the friends and party lists. One of the most notable upgrades has been the ability to utilise the M.2 SSD bay to expand the console storage. The PS5's usable internal SSD capacity is a rather strange 667.2 GB. Let's not forget that the original PS4 capacity was 500 gigs, so this is actually a step up from that, but the PS4 Pro came with a terabyte, and with games taking up more and more space to fit in more graphical detail and other types of data, this has been a bugbear for many who want to have more games at the ready. Every time there's a major update in Call of Duty, there's a discussion between PS4 friends as to which game will be sacrificed so that COD may live. I thought I'd gotten away with this when I upgraded to the PS5 until the exact same thing happened. Black Ops Cold War and Warzone together took up more than half the PS5 SSD. And yes, I could uninstall parts of the game, but that's not a long-term solution. So first I invested in an external SSD to put my PS4 games on. But with the new console, I wanted to be playing the PS5 games because of the speed. With all the boosts in performance you can get for some really great PS4 games, it's not the same as the PS5 versions with the near instant load times, which for me have been the biggest quality of life improvement between generations. So being able to add in another high-speed SSD to match the PS5's internal one has been very welcome. Only M.2 NVMe SSDs with certain specs will work. I recommend checking out Nas Compares channel for the recommendations, as he has very informative videos comparing lots of compatible SSDs with clear explanations on what the differences are. Now I'm just waiting for more of these new next gen titles to be released. Speaking of new titles being released, the PlayStation Showcase 2021 happened earlier in September, showing off a snippet of what we have to look forward to, and I am definitely excited for some of these titles. Horizon Forbidden West and God of War Ragnarok are two first-party PS5 titles that the masses are waiting for, as their predecessors were epic. I played both Horizon Zero Dawn and God of War on the PS4 Pro, and both looked amazing, with deep and immersive storylines, and I definitely want more to sink my teeth into. Others that I'm personally looking forward to include Forspoken, Spider-Man 2, Project Eve, and Tiny Tina's Wonderland. It was great to see some gameplay and what we have to look forward to. I just wish some of these were launch titles, as it would have been great to dive into some more PS5 titles early on, but some of the games aren't too far away. So what about games that are available now? Since launch, there's been a growing number of next-gen games and upgrades to PS4 titles. PS4 games I've played on the console include The Witcher 3, The Last of Us Remastered and The Last of Us 2, and Call of Duty Warzone. The Last of Us games look amazing on the new console, with The Last of Us 2 having the frame rate unlocked to achieve 60 frames per second. Days Gone is another PS4 game taking advantage of game boost to run in dynamic 4K at 60 frames per second. It's a treat to take in, and I do find myself stopping mid-game to do a little 360 and take it all in. I'd love to go back and play Horizon Zero Dawn and a few other games to see how the game boost has improved them, but I've got so many waiting to be started. That wouldn't be fair, would it? Moving on to PS5 titles, I played Spider-Man Remastered and Spider-Man Miles Morales, Outriders, Mortal Kombat 11, Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, and Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. No longer do I have to listen to the jet engine whine when the game boots up. All I hear is clear and directional audio, which is very handy in first-person shooter games. When it says fast travel in Spider-Man, it's not an exaggeration and takes mere seconds to appear at the jump point. Transitions from cutscenes to gameplay are seamless, making it hard to tell when one begins and another ends. And for those who have played fighting games on modern consoles, cutting down that time between bouts in Mortal Kombat 11 is like a breath of fresh air. So I didn't realise that I'd have to choose between the highest frame rate, which is performance mode, or the best resolution, which is fidelity mode, before I got the console. But after switching between the two, performance mode is definitely my preferred option. I'll definitely take the locked 60 frames per second and those buttery smooth movements over 30 frames. The Call of Duty games hitting 120 frames per second feels great and really helps in fast-paced action where movement and reflexes are critical. So we've gone through quite a bit of info outlining the current state of the PS5 and what's around the corner. So is now the time to get it? Well, if you're waiting for specific titles that aren't coming till next year, if you can play everything you want on your PS4, if you're not fussed about the current PS5 catalogue or loading times, it's worth waiting for stock to replenish, as it's a bit of a mission still to find one. There is already a slightly tweaked version out in certain countries, and there may be some further console revisions in the not too distant future, which could be an added bonus, although I can't see a different form factor coming this year. However, if there is a bunch of PS5 games that you've been looking forward to playing, if you hate waiting at loading screens, if you have a next-gen ready TV or monitor with HDMI 2.1 that has been patiently waiting for the connection to its digital soulmate, and if you're lucky enough to find one and have the means to purchase it, then I think it's a good time to jump on the PS5 train. With the latest firmware improvements, the formidable hardware specs, and the current and upcoming roster of games, this console will definitely level up your playing experience. Thanks so much for sticking with me. I hope this was a useful overview of the console and my personal experience of it so far. Have a great day, and I'll catch you in the next one.